The day my daughter told me, "Mom, you don't belong in this house anymore. It's ours now, not yours," something inside me shattered. I was 67 years old, a widow who had just buried the man I spent 43 years of my life with, and I thought at least family would be the place where I found comfort. Instead, it became the place where betrayal struck the deepest. My daughter, Victoria, and her husband didn't just ask me to step aside gently. They threw me out, as if I were some useless, embarrassing relic who had outlived her worth. And in that moment, I wasn't just losing a home. I was losing the illusion that blood alone creates love. But let me tell you something right now, what they didn't know was that my late husband, Robert, had prepared for this very moment. They thought they could crush me, strip me of dignity, and walk away with everything he and I built together. What they didn't realize was that a single piece of paper, his will, held secrets that would turn all of their greed against them. And as I stood outside that house, suitcase in hand, my daughter's voice still echoing in my ears, I felt a strange mix of pain and defiance. I wasn't just going to disappear. I wasn't going to crawl into a corner and die quietly, the way they wanted. No. I was going to find out the truth, and when I did, I would show them that a mother's strength doesn't fade with age. Sometimes, it only grows sharper when tested. Friends, this story isn't just about money. It's about betrayal, about how the people you give life to can sometimes turn against you in ways you never imagined. It's about hidden dangers within families, about secrets buried deep, and about the courage it takes to stand up even when everyone expects you to fall. Before we dive into the heart of this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like your own family treated you like a burden, like you were disposable once they thought they didn't need you anymore? If you've ever faced that kind of heartbreak, I want you to know, you are not alone. There are thousands, maybe millions of us, who have felt that sting. And I promise you, this story will remind you that justice has a way of finding those who think they can get away with cruelty. If you're new here, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It helps us keep telling stories that matter, stories about justice, resilience, and the strength to fight back when the world tries to push you down. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. I love seeing this community grow across states, across oceans, proof that even when families fail us, we can create new families through connection, compassion, and truth. Now, let's begin. This is the story of how I went from being a castaway mother to the one holding all the cards, how my daughter's greed became her undoing, and how secrets my husband carried into the grave would come back to protect me in ways I never expected. After Robert passed, the silence in the house was crushing. He had been my partner in everything. He was a quiet man, a man who lived with discipline, who never flaunted money, who carried himself with a calm strength that made me feel safe, no matter how chaotic the world was. For most of our marriage, I thought we were comfortable. I never realized how much he had hidden from me, not out of secrecy, but out of his deep belief that money was never to be the center of life. So when the lawyer read his will and revealed that his estate was worth $30 million, I nearly fell out of my chair. $30 million. My Robert, the man who wore the same shoes for 10 years, had left behind a fortune I didn't even know existed. At first, I didn't even know what to do with it. I wasn't a woman of extravagance. My clothes were plain, my meals simple, my needs few. I thought maybe this money could finally allow me to travel, maybe see places Robert and I always dreamed of. But before I had even a moment to process, Rachel and Brad were at my door. My daughter's face carried a tight smile that never reached her eyes, and Brad, tall and always a little too eager, had his hand on her shoulder like he was pushing her forward. "Mom," Rachel began, her voice overly sweet, "we need to talk about Dad's will." I remember the way she said we. Not you. Not your. Already it was a collective ownership in her mind. I smiled faintly, trying to be gentle. "Honey, there's time for that. Right now, I just need to breathe." But Rachel shook her head. "Mom, let's be honest. You don't need $30 million. You're 67. You've lived your life. Brad and I are drowning in debt. Tyler needs school tuition. We deserve this chance. Dad would want us to have it. Brad nodded along, like a bobblehead, his eyes gleaming with desperation. And that was when I realized this wasn't about love. This wasn't about family. This was about survival for them, survival built on my sacrifice. At first, I told myself it was just stress. Grief makes people say cruel things. But as days went on, the pressure grew. Rachel would show up with Tyler, putting the little boy in my arms, whispering, "Don't you want him to have a future? Don't you want him to remember his grandmother as generous, not selfish?" It cut into me like knives. I loved that child with everything I had. But I also knew Robert's wishes. He wanted me secure, protected. He had made this decision deliberately, carefully, and I couldn't dishonor him by giving it all away so quickly. Then the small things began. My mailbox, pried open. My trash cans, overturned, as though someone was digging through them. My car, parked in the driveway, suddenly refusing to start. Later, the mechanic told me the brake lines looked worn, but I knew better. My medicine bottles felt off. Like someone had tampered with them. And then came the day of the accident. I was driving home from the grocery store, the sun low in the sky, when the brake pedal went soft beneath my foot. My heart slammed against my chest as the car picked up speed on the hill. I swerved, nearly missing an oak tree, before crashing into a ditch. My hands shook as I pulled myself out, blood dripping down my temple, but alive. Barely. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table, the house cold and silent, I thought about my daughter. My Rachel. Could she really have done this? Could the little girl I raised, the child I held when she was sick, the teenager I stayed up all night worrying about, could she have truly wanted me dead? The truth settled in my bones like ice. Yes. She could. And if I didn't act fast, she would. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old house made me flinch, every shadow felt like it was reaching for me. But somewhere between midnight and dawn, fear hardened into resolve. If Rachel and Brad thought I was just a helpless old woman, they had another thing coming. I might have been 67, but I had lived through enough storms to know when to fight back. The first step was proof. My word against theirs would mean nothing. People always want to believe the smiling daughter, the devoted son-in-law, over the grieving widow who seems paranoid. So I went online, shaky fingers tapping against the keyboard, and ordered discreet security cameras. Small, nearly invisible. By the end of the week, they were hidden around my home, in the kitchen, the living room, near the medicine cabinet. The wait was agony. Every knock on the door, every phone call, every time Rachel's name popped up on my screen, my stomach tightened. When she came by, she tried to act casual. "Mom, let's do dinner soon. I'll cook something special for you." Her smile was stretched thin, her eyes darting around the house like she was casing the place. I forced myself to play along. I smiled, nodded, even hugged her. But behind my back, I checked the cameras every night. It didn't take long. 2 weeks later, the footage showed exactly what I dreaded. Rachel and Brad slipping in with a spare key. Brad rifling through my filing cabinet, snapping pictures of documents. Rachel standing at my pill bottles, holding one up to the light, whispering, "Just a little more. She won't even notice." My stomach churned as I watched her hands move with such precision, such calm cruelty. This was not a moment of weakness. This was a plan. I saved every second of the footage onto an external drive and locked it in a safe deposit box at the bank. If anything happened to me, I wanted the truth to be found. But I knew video alone might not be enough. I needed allies. That's when Maria Santos entered my life. A private detective recommended by an old church friend, Maria was sharp-eyed, steady-voiced, and had that kind of presence that made you trust her instantly. She sat at my kitchen table, listening quietly as I told her everything, her pen gliding across her notepad. "They're escalating," she said firmly when I finished. The car, the pills, the pressure, it's only a matter of time before they make a move you can't walk away from. We can't just wait for them to succeed. We need to bait them. We need them caught red-handed. I stared at her. You mean, pretend? Maria nodded. Exactly. We let them think their plan is working. But we do it on your terms, not theirs. The thought terrified me. To eat poisoned food, to sit at a table with my would-be killers, smiling, pretending not to know, every instinct screamed against it. But then I thought of Robert. Of his years of careful saving, of his trust that I would protect what he left behind. Of Tyler, that sweet boy, who deserved to grow up without parents who believed murder was an answer. And I knew I couldn't back down. So the plan was set. Rachel would invite me to dinner. I would accept. I would eat just enough to convince her, wearing a discreet recorder under my blouse. Police officers would wait nearby, alerted to rush in the moment I gave the signal. Maria called it my insurance policy. I called it my only chance. The days leading up to that dinner were some of the longest of my life. Every time I saw Rachel, she was more cheerful, more affectionate than she'd been in years. Mom, I'm making your favorite. Just like when I was little. The way she said it made my stomach twist. Did she really believe killing me was an act of love? On the night of the dinner, I stood in my bedroom mirror, hands trembling as I adjusted the necklace that hid the small microphone. Robert, I whispered, staring into my own weary eyes, give me strength. And then I walked out the door into the lion's den. The table was set beautifully that night, almost too beautifully. A white cloth, candles flickering low, dishes gleaming under the light. Rachel moved around the kitchen with the grace of a hostess, humming softly, while Brad poured wine into my glass with an exaggerated smile. Mom, Rachel said, setting down a steaming casserole dish in the center of the table, I made your favorite. Just like when I was little. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes lingered too long on mine, searching for weakness. I sat down, forcing myself to keep my hands steady, though inside my pulse was thundering. The recorder pressed against my chest felt heavy, like a secret burning to get out. I prayed the officers waiting outside would hear everything. Tyler wasn't there. That broke my heart more than anything. Rachel had sent him to stay at a friend's house, no doubt to keep him away from what she planned. For a fleeting second, I was grateful. He wouldn't have to see this. Rachel spooned food onto my plate herself, her hand delicate, careful. Too careful. The smell was familiar, comforting even, but I couldn't stop seeing the hidden footage in my mind, her whispering over my medicine bottles, her voice cold and calculated. I picked up my fork. Brad was watching me. Rachel was watching me. The air was suffocating. With a trembling smile, I took a small bite. The food was warm, seasoned well. Normal. But almost immediately, a strange heat rose in my chest. My lips tingled, my throat tightened just slightly. My body recognized the danger before my mind could. I was swallowing poison. Brad leaned back in his chair, smirking faintly. Rachel folded her hands under her chin, her eyes bright, almost giddy. So, Mom, she said softly, do you ever think about the future? About what happens to the family after you're gone? Her words were like a knife twisting in my stomach. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. I felt my breathing grow uneven, my heartbeat stumble. Maria had warned me this would happen, told me to eat only a little, just enough to create symptoms without lasting damage. But it was terrifying all the same, knowing that every second I delayed could be my last. I forced myself to keep the act going. I smiled faintly, coughed into my napkin, pretending to dismiss the unease. My hand brushed against the edge of the table, steadying myself, and I thought of the one lifeline I had, the code word. Butterfly. That was what Maria and I had chosen. A word that felt natural for me, something from Robert's garden he used to love, but unusual enough to catch the officer's attention instantly. Rachel stood, her smile widening. Let me get you some water, Mom. You don't look so good. Her voice was full of fake concern, dripping with satisfaction underneath. And that was the moment I leaned back, my vision beginning to blur, and whispered hoarsely into the silence of the room. Butterfly. For a second, Rachel froze. Her eyes narrowed. Brad tilted his head, frowning, confused. Then the door burst open. The crash of boots, the shout of officers, the flash of uniforms, it all came flooding into that dining room in a wave of chaos. Rachel dropped the glass in her hand, shattering it across the floor. Brad stumbled back, shouting, "What the hell is this?" But there was no escaping. Hands pulled them away from the table, pinning their arms behind their backs as they screamed and cursed. The officers read their rights in firm, unshakable voices. Rachel's face went pale, drained of all color, as she realized the trap had snapped shut around her. I sat frozen, breath ragged, tears running down my cheeks. Relief and grief crashed together inside me. My own daughter, the baby I had raised, had just tried to kill me with a smile on her face. And now the world would finally know the truth. The night of the arrest is burned into my memory, not for the chaos, but for the silence that followed. After the officers dragged Rachel and Brad out in handcuffs, I sat alone at that table, staring at the broken glass glistening across the floor. The food sat untouched, steam still rising, as if mocking me. The people I loved most in this world had just tried to kill me, and part of me still wanted to believe it was all some horrible mistake. But the look in Rachel's eyes as the officers pinned her down was not confusion or regret. It was rage. When I was escorted outside, neighbors stood clustered at the edge of their lawns, watching the scene unfold. The flashing lights painted the street red and blue, voices carried in the night. I heard whispers, my name, Rachel's name, disbelief. To them, we had always been a normal family. No one could imagine that a daughter would poison her own mother for money. The weeks that followed blurred into endless interviews, statements, and the steady, suffocating march of the legal system. Detective Maria Santos stayed by my side, patient and unwavering, piecing together every shred of evidence. The recordings from the hidden cameras, the stolen documents, the tampered medicine bottles, all of it stacked against Rachel and Brad like a tower ready to crush them. But nothing could prepare me for the trial. I sat in the courtroom, hands folded in my lap, staring at Rachel across the aisle. She looked smaller somehow, stripped of the confidence she had worn that night at dinner. Yet when her eyes met mine, there was no shame. If anything, there was defiance. Brad sat beside her, stone-faced, avoiding my gaze. The prosecution laid out everything, the financial desperation, the growing debts, the recordings where Rachel talked about finally being free once I was gone. I heard my daughter's voice played for strangers, cold and calculating, and each word cut deeper than the last. And then came her testimony. Rachel stood there, chin lifted high, and admitted it all. She spoke with a clarity that chilled me to the bone. Yes, she had planned to kill me. Yes, she had pressured Brad into helping her. No, she did not feel sorry. She's old, Rachel said, her voice echoing through the courtroom. She doesn't need $30 million. That money was supposed to secure our future, mine and Brad's, and Tyler's. We were drowning in debt, and she was just sitting on a fortune she didn't even know about. I did what I had to do for my family. For her family. The words stung worse than any knife. I wanted to stand and scream that I was her family too, that Tyler loved his grandmother, that Robert would have been horrified at what she had become. But I couldn't. I sat in silence, tears streaming down my face, while Rachel twisted love into justification for murder. The jury deliberated for less than a day. The verdict came back swift and heavy, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of attempted murder. Both Rachel and Brad were sentenced to 25 years to life. As the judge read the sentence, Rachel didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just stared at me, her eyes hard, her lips curled in the faintest sneer. It was as if she wanted me to know that even in defeat, she would never admit I was right. When they led her away in shackles, I felt my chest collapse with a weight I couldn't describe. I had come here seeking justice, and I got it. But there was no victory in watching your child be taken to prison. There was only grief. Afterward, I received letters. Long, rambling pages written in Rachel's handwriting, sent from her cell. At first, I opened them, searching desperately for a flicker of remorse, a single word that showed she understood the horror of what she had done. But each letter was the same: excuses, blame, a warped kind of love wrapped around cruelty. Eventually, I stopped opening them at all. They sit in a box somewhere, gathering dust, a reminder of the daughter I lost long before the trial began. And yet, despite it all, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. The love of a mother doesn't vanish, no matter how deep the wound. But love doesn't mean forgetting. And it certainly doesn't mean forgiving when forgiveness is only met with more poison. In the months after the trial, my house felt unbearably quiet. Every creak of the floorboards, every tick of the grandfather clock reminded me of what had been lost. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was hollow, like walking through the ruins of a life that had once been whole. I found myself drifting through the days, setting the table for two without realizing, or reaching for the phone to call Robert, forgetting for just a moment that he was gone. And then I'd remember, and the grief would hit me all over again. But it wasn't just grief. It was anger, too. Anger at Rachel and Brad for betraying me. Anger at myself for not seeing it sooner. Anger at a world where parents could be treated like burdens once they had outlived their usefulness. I couldn't let that anger eat me alive. I had to turn it into something else, something Robert would have been proud of. That was when the idea for the Robert Sullivan Foundation was born. I wanted to create something that would honor his memory and protect others from going through what I had. With $25 million of the inheritance, I established a foundation dedicated to helping elderly victims of financial abuse, particularly those targeted by their own families. Too many stories like mine were hidden in shame and silence. Too many mothers and fathers were manipulated, pressured, or outright robbed by the people they trusted most. The foundation provided legal assistance, housing support, counseling, and, most importantly, visibility. We brought these hidden stories into the light. We partnered with law enforcement to investigate suspicious cases, and with social workers to offer victims a safe place to land. Within the first year, we had already helped dozens of families. Within 5 years, it was hundreds. And every time a victim stood up in court, armed with the resources we provided, I felt a small piece of my own wound begin to heal. But healing wasn't straightforward. Nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, replaying Rachel's words from the trial, her cold justification echoing in my mind. I did what I had to do for my family. Sometimes I wondered if, in some twisted way, she believed it. Other times I wondered if I had failed her as a mother, if there had been a moment years ago when I could have set her on a different path. The foundation gave me purpose, but it couldn't fill the space Rachel had left behind. That absence remained a shadow in everything I did. It was Tyler, my grandson, who began to bring some of that light back. At first, he struggled terribly. How could he not? His mother and father were both in prison, and his world had collapsed around him. For a while, he wouldn't speak much, and when he did, it was always short, clipped answers. But slowly, with time and counseling, he began to open up. One evening, we sat together in the backyard, the same place where Robert used to grill steaks on Sunday afternoons. Tyler looked at me, his face pale but determined, and said, "Grandma, I want to study criminal justice. I want to help people like you. People who need someone to protect them." I'll never forget that moment. The boy who had been used as leverage in his parents' cruel scheme was choosing a different legacy. He was choosing justice, not greed. And I knew, right then, that Robert's strength still ran through our family. Over the years, Tyler grew into a young man I could be proud of. He worked part-time at the foundation during college, helping other families who had been torn apart by betrayal. Sometimes, when I watched him sitting with an elderly victim, listening with patience and compassion, I could see echoes of Robert in him. It reminded me that even in the darkest betrayals, some part of love survives. Still, I couldn't escape Rachel's letters. They kept arriving, like clockwork, each one filled with manipulations and twisted rationalizations. I refused to answer, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy them either. I locked them away in a drawer, telling myself that maybe one day Tyler might want to read them, to understand his mother in his own way. Through all of this, I learned something vital: survival is not the same as living. Surviving meant making it through the trial, through the betrayal, through the grief. Living meant taking that pain and turning it into action, into purpose, into something bigger than myself. The Robert Sullivan Foundation wasn't just a charity. It was proof that Rachel's betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It was proof that resilience can be louder than greed. And yet, there were still days when I walked past family photographs and my chest ached. Days when I'd hear a song Robert used to hum and find tears spilling down my cheeks. Healing wasn't linear. It came in waves, some stronger than others. But with every person we helped, every life we touched through the foundation, I found another reason to keep going. Robert once told me, back when we were young and broke, money comes and goes, Maggie. What matters is what we do with it while we have it. I used to think that was just one of his simple sayings, a way to soothe me when I worried about bills. But now I understood. He had left me the means not just to survive, but to create something lasting. And that was exactly what I was going to do. Sometimes I still wonder how different life would have been if Rachel had chosen love over greed. There are mornings when I catch myself staring out the kitchen window, coffee in hand, imagining her walking up the front path with Tyler, laughter on her lips instead of venom. But then the truth settles in. She made her choice, and I survived it. What I've learned is this: family is not about blood alone. Family is about who shows up when everything falls apart. Family is about who defends you when you're weakest, who protects you when others try to exploit your trust. Robert showed me that kind of love until his very last breath. Jake Morrison, Mrs. Chin, Detective Santos, even the lawyers and advocates who helped me build the foundation, they became family too. And Tyler, my sweet grandson, grew into a man who proved that love can still bloom even from poisoned roots. I am not naive. I know there are countless others like me, elders being manipulated, tricked, or pushed aside by the very people they raised. Some are too ashamed to speak, some are too scared, and some don't survive long enough to tell their stories. That is why I tell mine. Because silence only protects the guilty, and shame only serves the greedy. The Robert Sullivan Foundation continues to grow, and every time I meet another survivor, I see resilience reflected back at me. I see proof that we are more than what was done to us. We are more than pawns in someone else's financial scheme. We are people with dignity, people with voices, and people worth protecting. I wish I could say that I've forgiven Rachel. But forgiveness, I've learned, is not a gift you owe to someone who tried to bury you in the ground. Forgiveness is something you might find for yourself, when the wounds no longer bleed. I'm not there yet. Maybe one day. For now, I focus on the lives being saved because I chose to fight instead of fade. And so, if you take anything from my story, let it be this: never let anyone convince you that your life has less value just because of your age, or your bank account, or your vulnerability. We all deserve safety, respect, and love. And when those we trusted most betray us, we can still rise, we can still rebuild, and we can still choose to live. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you do if you were in my situation? Have you or someone you know ever gone through something like this, betrayed by your own family, pressured, manipulated, or left to fend for yourself? Please share your thoughts and stories in the comments. And tell me, which story should we explore next together? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the notification bell so you never miss another story. And before you go, let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing our community stretch across so many places and experiences. Thank you for listening to my story. My name is Margaret Maggie Sullivan, and I am not just a survivor. I am proof that even when betrayal cuts the deepest, resilience and justice can rise higher.